Economics is that field of study wherein human beings try to allocate their limited resources to fulfill as many wants as possible. Now, this can be done at individual level or this can be done at the country level. So in both the cases, the problem will remain the same. And the problem is allocation of limited resources in the fulfillment of as many wants as possible. So we can say the basic purpose of economics is to fill the gap between means and ends. Means implies the resources, ends means the wants. So ends means something which is to be done ultimately. So ultimately we have to satisfy our wants. But means the resources with which we will satisfy our wants. So this gap between the limited means and the unlimited resources is taken care of by this subject that is called as economics. So when we do it at individual level, it becomes microeconomics. But when we do it at the country level or at macro level, at aggregate level, this becomes macroeconomics. But here we must remember that microeconomics doesn't simply means that we are doing it at one person level. Here, when I say individual means individual economic unit. So please remember that here in microeconomics, individual means individual economic unit. This individual economic unit may include one person. It may include group of persons. It may include a family, that is household. It may include a firm, and it can also include industry. So micro is not that small as we speak or study in subject like physics, where we are using the term microscope. So it is not that minute. It is only minute or small in comparison to macroeconomics. So it includes the study of human behavior and economic actions. We study human behavior and economic actions under microeconomics. And the economic agents which are included under microeconomics will be one person, group of persons, family, firm or company, and finally industry. So that means if we study up to industry level, it becomes microeconomics. But when our study goes beyond industry, then it becomes macroeconomics. So it means under microeconomics, we will study as to how consumer maximizes the utility or satisfaction. We study as to how household manages the budget. That means it is able to get maximum possible satisfaction for the various family members with the limited income of the family. Under microeconomics, we also study the way a producer maximizes the profit. Under microeconomics, we also study the mechanism by which prices of goods and services are determined through market forces of demand and supply. Everybody knows whether that person has studied economics or not. That when the price of a commodity is high, you demand less. And when the price falls, you start demanding more of that commodity. So that means the incentive of every consumer is to pay lowest possible amount for purchasing a commodity. That is why price of a commodity and the quantity demanded are inversely related to each other. Now, this is a very common logic. So whether you have studied economics or not, you can very well understand that the relationship between price and the demand for the commodity are inversely related. That is how we will say demand curve is downward sloping. On the other hand, there are other market players also. Other market players are the producers, the suppliers, as against the incentive of the consumer who wants to pay the lowest possible amount for the commodity one purchases. The producer, the seller wishes to sell the commodity at the highest possible price. That means the producer or the supplier would like to sell more when the price which is being offered in the market is more. This way we can say the price of the commodity and the quantity supplied are directly related to each other. So that means we have two curves. One is showing the demand curve, which is downward sloping curve. The other curve is supply curve, which is upward sloping. The point where these two curves intersect each other, what we get is called as equilibrium point. And this equilibrium point is considered to be the best point for a consumer, for a producer, for a supplier, for a seller, for industry. And there is no reason why the economic agent would like to divert or deviate from this particular point. So once we get this equilibrium point, we shall be able to know how much price we are going to pay and how much price we are going to receive. That means the payment is to be made by the consumer. This is one market player. And payment is to be received by another market player, that is called as seller or supplier. This term equilibrium has been derived from physics. And in equilibrium, we say that it is a state of rest. It is a state of no change. It is a position from where no person, no individual, no economic agent or nobody would like to deviate. So when this term was propounded by the scientist, this term included a point where the body is in the state of rest. And in case you disturb that body, self-correcting forces will start and the body will come back to the original state. And in case this happens, we call this equilibrium as a stable equilibrium. Now the same thing can be extended to this subject, that is economics. Economics also assume that equilibrium is a state of balance. It is a state of no change. It is the best state of the economic agent, which may be consumer, which may be producer, which may be seller, it may be supplier. And in case you deviate from this particular point of equilibrium, self-correcting forces will start and the system will come back to the original position. And this is the way we say this equilibrium is a stable equilibrium. So in case we deviate from this equilibrium point and we do not come back to this point, even with the self-correcting forces, we will say it is unstable equilibrium. There are actually three types of equilibrium: stable equilibrium, unstable equilibrium, and neutral equilibrium. So when we disturb the equilibrium, and in case because of the self-correcting forces, we come back to the equilibrium point, once again, we call it stable equilibrium. If we keep on moving away and away from the equilibrium point, it is called as unstable equilibrium. And in case we keep on hovering around the equilibrium, we are neither moving towards the equilibrium point nor away from the equilibrium point. It is called as neutral equilibrium. So stable means we are ultimately coming back to that point, which is the best point. Unstable means we are moving away and away from that point, and neutral means we are moving around that point, neither moving away nor being close to that point. This equilibrium concept is very important in economics because every economic agent, whether as consumer, where you want to maximize your utility or satisfaction, whether as producer where you want to maximize your production or output or profit, whether as industrialist where the objective is to reduce the cost of employment, that is to produce at the minimum possible cost. And minimum possible cost means you have to pay minimum possible amount to the various factors of production who are rendering the services. So the objective for employer is to minimize the cost. Objective of producer is to maximize the output. Objective of the seller is to maximize the sales or to maximize the profit. Sometimes they may be overlapping. The same person may be producer. He may also be supplier. He may also be seller. So that means all these objectives may also be achieved or may also to be achieved by the same economic agent as producer, as seller, as profit maximizing firm, or as employer minimization of the cost. So what I said so far, in economics, our objective is to minimize the gap between the means and the ends, between the resources and the wants. And please remember that there is no economy where this gap is not there. So objective of economics is to reduce the gap between the means and the ends, that is between the resources and the wants. And there is no economy where this gap is not there. So that means everywhere there is a gap between the resources and the wants. So what exactly we see in different situations? We find that resources are limited. Secondly, wants are unlimited. Thirdly, the resources have alternative uses. Everywhere, in every economy, in every market, irrespective of the level of economic development, means whether the country is developed, less developed, or developing, whether we have capitalist or socialist mode of production, or whether there is a mixed economy, everywhere we will find three basic or inherent features. These include unlimited wants. Secondly, limited resources. Thirdly, alternative uses of the resources. So the wants are unlimited. That means as soon as we satisfy one want, another want takes its place. And the rate at which these wants multiply or increase is much more than the rate at which the resources increase. So this problem of unlimited wants is all pervading problem. That means it exists everywhere. And the rate at which these wants multiply or increase is much more than the rate at which the resources increase. So the second feature is resources are limited. And when we say the resources are limited, please remember that we do not say in absolute terms, we say in relative terms. That means in comparison to the wants, the resources are less. In comparison to the wants, in comparison to the ends, the means are limited. Now here I would say, suppose some of the developed countries decide together to donate most of their resources to India. The question arises whether economic problem of India will be over or not. So Kamil has given a clear indication that economic problem will not be over. Because I've just said that as soon as we get our resources, that means we are able to fulfill some wants, new wants take their place. And I've already clarified that the rate at which wants multiply or increase is much more than the rate at which the resources increase. So even when most of the resources of the developed countries are transferred to India, our economic problem will not be over, because as soon as our wants are satisfied, new wants take its place. And this should be very much clear when we put our desires, our wants before our parents. And either they deny or they accept. In case they deny, we keep on asking for the same. repeatedly जब तक हमारी बात नहीं मानी जाती. And in case our wants are or our desires are met by our parents, we will have fresh desires, new wants. So that means there is no end to which our wants can increase or multiply. So that means this gap between the resources and wants will always be there, irrespective of the level of economic development and irrespective of the fact that the resources are transferred from developed nations to any poor nation or developing nation. And the third important feature about every economy is, and that is very important, the resources have alternative uses. And please do remember that in case any one of the three features is missing, there is no need to study economics. That means economics will serve no purpose in case any one of the three features is missing. But the point is, none of the three features is missing. So suppose we say that our wants are not unlimited. So suppose we have thinking like that. So we do not want more. So that means we have limited wants, limited resources. So with limited wants, we will be able to satisfy all the wants because our resources are also limited. But the fact is, economics is not dealing with such sadhus, sannyasis or tapasvis. Economics deals with rational persons. And these rational persons have a thinking that is they prefer more to less. And you must have heard about ye dil mange more. So that means as you are able to get something, you would like to have something more of the same commodity or some other commodity. So that means the objective of maximization of utility or satisfaction is there without any exception. And similarly, when we say that resources are not limited, rather these are unlimited, again there is no economic problem. So if we are having unlimited wants and suppose resources are also unlimited, so gap is not there between the wants and the resources. And if there is no gap between resources and wants, that means there is no purpose is served by the study of economics. I have just said that even when the resources are transferred from developed nation to the less developed one, the gap will still persist because we never say that resources are limited in absolute sense, we say it in relative sense. So in comparison to the wants, our resources are limited, and as soon as we get more resources, our wants also increase at the same time, and the gap will always persist between the wants and the resources. Now comes the third point, that is the that is the alternative uses of the resources. Now suppose the resources are having fixed uses. Suppose the resources have specific use only. If the resources have specific use, again, economics is not going to serve any purpose. The purpose of economics is served only because of some flexibility being given by the subject. That is, which is more important want, which is less important want. In case the resources can be put to only specific uses, that is, there is no way in which you can add to the satisfaction. There is no way in which you can improve your level of satisfaction. But resources do not have fixed uses. Resources do not have specific uses. These are having alternative uses. And since these resources are having alternative uses, which we have to decide to which particular use we have to put these resources. And moreover, we have to decide which particular want is to be satisfied first, which want to be satisfied next, and so on. So that means the subject economics set the priorities. And in case we have limited resources, we will first fulfill the want which is the most important, then relatively less important, then relatively less and less important. So that means we will set the priorities. We will group our wants and our desires in order of urgency. And the want which is most urgent will be fulfilled first. Then, depending upon the further availability of the resources, we would like to satisfy the other wants. Even the time. Time is also a resource. And there is something special about this resource. And special thing about this resource is that every person is having same time available 24 hours every day. Life may be less or more for different person, but in a day 24 hours are available to everybody, and you have to decide how to utilize this time. Most of the students have decided to attend to the lectures, but still one or two students have not attended this lecture. So that means flexibility is there. So whether it is time or whether it is any other resource, you have to decide where these resources have to be used. So because of these three important features, and particularly the last one, alternative uses of the resources. So the task of economics is to fulfill the gap between the resources and wants. And this gap is fulfilled because the resources have alternative uses. And it is the purpose of economics to select the best possible want, then second level best, then third level best. And in this way, we keep on satisfying different wants and requirements. In brief, we can say the task of economics is the best or the efficient utilization of the resources. I've simply said that this task can be assigned either at macro level or at micro level. So when a consumer has to maximize the satisfaction, household has to decide the best possible use of the income on the different family members, or a business firm has to decide the price of a product, or industry has to decide the rate at which the factors of production to be employed. Everywhere we are using microeconomics. But when it is a matter of the whole economy, that is when we go beyond the industry level, we come across the concept like national income, national employment, national output, and general price level. These are the four broad aggregates that we study under macroeconomics. To repeat, national income, national employment, national output or production, and general price level. So these are the four broad aggregates that we study under macroeconomics. So this is the basic difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics. If I study all the students of this class individually, like the way I did in the beginning of the class, on the basis of whatever I have noted down about different students, I found that most of the students are having very good score in the undergraduate program. So I can comment upon the whole class. I can comment upon the level of intelligence and the sincerity of the whole class. So this is how we can comment upon the macro on the basis of the information received from the parts, that is micro. Now the question arises whether what is true for micro is always true for macro. Like the example that I have just given to you, okay, suppose there are 42 students in this class, I have assessed every student, so I can comment upon the performance of the whole class. Now the question arises, the same is applicable between micro and macroeconomics or not? The answer would be no. So why the answer is no? I am going to quote some examples. Most of you have studied law of demand. It is very simple to understand that there is a negative relationship between the price and the quantity demanded. This is called as a trade-off. If one thing is rising, other thing is going down, that is a trade-off between the two. Like there is a trade-off between income and leisure. If you want to earn more income, you will have to waste less time on leisure. And if you waste more time on leisure, you will have less income by working for less number of hours. So similarly, as far as the relationship between the price and the quantity demanded is concerned, this relationship is inverse. So when price charged by the seller is more, you would like to demand less. Now my question is, what happens when everybody starts demanding more? Because price of the product is less. Under microeconomics, the relationship between price and demand is inverse. That is, when price falls, demand increases. But in macroeconomics, the relationship is direct. That is, if everybody starts demanding more of any product, there will be increase in the price of the product. Here we must remember that in microeconomics, price is the cause, demand is the effect. But in macroeconomics, demand is the cause and price is the effect. So that means whatever is true for micro may not be true for macro. I am giving you another example. Suppose while traveling in the market, you go back to your house and on the way you find 50,000 rupees lying on the road and you just pick up. So the person who finds 50,000 rupees lying on the road, that person become richer at the cost of some other person who has lost this money. So by finding 50,000 rupees, a person can become richer. This is something which is true for microeconomics. But suppose finance minister of the country decides to print 50,000 for everybody. So it was true for microeconomics that when 50,000 rupees was found by you on the road, you became richer. But when 50,000 rupees is printed for everybody by the finance minister of the country cannot become richer. Because when more money is printed in the economy, this will lead to excess money supply. And this excess money supply will bring down the purchasing power of money. It will lead to inflation in the economy. So if you double the total availability of money supply in the economy, the inflation rate will double, the purchasing power will become half. So whatever is true for micro is not true for macroeconomics. Now here, I would like to tell you one important fact about which our present Prime Minister told some years back, I think before even he came to the power or just after coming to the power. And he said that crores of rupees are lying in the Swiss account. So much money is there that every person will be able to get 15 lakh. There is so much money lying in the Swiss account that everyone will be able to get 15 lakh. And this statement was captured by opposition leaders. And they are waiting eagerly for years when we will get 15 lakh rupees, when everybody will be getting 15 lakh. So the only point is, I am going to clarify at this stage by quoting the same example, that in case same amount is distributed to the entire population of the country cannot become richer. Please remember this. But in case we create infrastructure, in case we produce goods and services, the country can become richer. So there is no point in distributing 15 lakh rupees, even if it is available, because it is not going to make people richer. It is simply going to add to the inflation rate. And this is what is happening when the government revises the pay scales of the government employees. There is inflation. Then DA is announced. So people must see where their welfare lies. And this is something which is going to be taught by this subject, economics. Economics is going to teach you so many things. You will not be able to believe. I will give you so many important things which you can learn from economics. So many ways in which you can improve your life financially as well as otherwise. And this is something which is going to be told by economics only. This is going to be taught by economics only. Even the new subject, environmental studies, that has become compulsory everywhere. The origin of this subject also lies in this subject, economics. Because What economics teaches us? Optimal utilization of resources. Is this clear to you? About 10, 15, 20 years back, no one was teaching you about this subject, environmental science, but economics was still there. That we were teaching you how to utilize your resources in the best possible manner. But now this environmental science will teach, okay, when you are not using light, please switch off. When you do not require electricity, you should not switch on. You should keep them in switched off condition. In case you do not want to waste the resources, you will be able to conserve the resources for further generations. This is something which is taught in environmental science. You want to keep the resources not only for the present generation, but also for future generation. So conservation of resources is something which is taught by environmental science today. But this is something which was already taught by this subject, economics, optimal utilization of resources. So the message is clear from this subject itself. Now I'm going to give you another example. Saving. You all know that saving is a virtue. We save to keep our future bright. We want to save money for that period when we may not earn. We may not be able to earn. So that is why we save. So in case you save 1 lakh rupees every year, it is going to increase your welfare. If 2% do, they will be able to increase their welfare. If 10% are able to save, they will be able to increase their welfare. But suppose I say everybody start increasing saving in the economy. Do you know what is going to be the implication? If there is saving or there is increase in saving by everybody in the economy, there will be a drastic cut in consumption expenditure. Because you all know that consumption plus saving is income. Whatever income that you earn is either consumed or saved. So if you increase the saving, if everybody starts saving, there will be drastic cut in consumption expenditure. And please do remember that expenditure by one person is a source of income for others. Expenditure by one person is a source of income for other. If everybody starts saving, that means everybody is cutting down the consumption expenditure. And if everybody is cutting down the consumption expenditure, that means the income of every person is declined. And this is going to reduce the income level in the country. And when the income level declines, both consumption and saving will come down. So that means saving is a virtue for individual, but not for the whole economy. So whatever is true for micro may not be true for macro. This is the reason why Mohammedans pray God or Allahs. Do you know what is the prayer made by the Mohammedans? They never pray God or Allahs to have more income or to have more saving or to have more work. They simply pray God to have more expenditure. Because expenditure by one person is a source for income for other. So that means when there is increase in expenditure by every person, there will be creation of income for every person. So suppose you have got only 2 lakh rupees, but you purchase a car worth 5 lakh rupees. That means you are creating income worth 5 lakh rupees by incurring this expenditure. And in order to meet that expenditure, you will work more. You will tend to work more. So this is something which is taught in macroeconomics. So whatever is true for micro may not be true for macro. Though there are numerous examples, but I will give only one more example. If you have your account with any commercial bank, if you close that account, it is not going to have any adverse implication for the bank because there are numerous customers. So even if 1 or 2 customers close the account, it is not going to adversely affect the banking system. So this is something which is true for micro. But suppose every customer of a commercial bank start withdrawing money or start closing account with the commercial bank. Do you know what will happen? There is no bank in Delhi, in India, or in the entire world which is able to honor the obligation of all the customer at the same time. So this is the reason why that what is true for micro may not be true for macro. So this is the reason why we do not study micro and macro in isolation. We have to study them together. Samuelson was a great economist. He said that micro and macroeconomics are absolutely vital to understand this subject, economics. In case we study the one and remain ignorant about the other, we are less than half educated. So micro and macroeconomics is not like that. If you study micro, you have got 50% education of economics. It's not like that. So if you study the one and remain ignorant about the other, you are less than half educated. So what we have to do, we have to study both micro and macroeconomics. There are several examples where we have found that there has been recession in an economy, but there are several sectors and subsectors of the economy which are completely insulated from the adverse effect of recession. Teaching is one such profession. Even if when there is recession in the economy, this profession is not adversely affected by this recession. So that means this is something true for macro. So there is recession in the economy. This doesn't mean that in every sector or subsector of the economy there will be recession. So with all these examples, you should be clear that micro and macroeconomic both are absolutely vital. You have to study them together. And even if you start a business, your business is microeconomic undertaking, but you have to work an environment that is given by macroeconomics. You have to follow. You have to take into account the monetary and fiscal policies of the government. You cannot ignore the rate of interest decided by the commercial bank. You cannot ignore the bank rate policy. You cannot ignore the various fiscal policy instruments of the government like subsidies, taxation, etc. So even when you start a business like a microeconomic unit, you have to take into account the macroeconomic environment of the business.